5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
You're listening to the GHT Overland Podcast. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on the GHT Overland Podcast.
If you're a first-time listener, thank you. We appreciate you being here. If you're a returning listener, our hats off to you, and we hope we're bringing good value, a little entertainment, along with interesting variety. Be sure to let us know if there's anything more or anything different you'd like to hear.
Have we got a treat in store for you today?
We have energy.
We have women overlanding.
We have conservation.
We have Africa.
What is believed to be the most trafficked mammal on Earth other than humans? Lisa?
Well, I naturally gravitate to the elephant for their ivory.
Or rhinos?
True. However, it's actually the pangolin.
And how many people do you think know what a pangolin is? I mean, honestly, did we know what a pangolin was before this, embarrassingly?
No. So I would say maybe 22% knows what a pangolin.
20, not 23, but 22?
Right.
Still a decent number, I suppose. Did you know over 1 million were poached in the decade prior to 2014?
Ooh.
That's just crazy.
That is crazy.
So we learned a lot on this episode, on episode 1 and episode 2, to be clear. Not everything, not all the gold is in this one. You get to stick around and listen to 2 episodes with Carla. Lisa, how many insects can a pangolin eat in 1 year? If a pangolin can't eat insects, how many insects would a pangolin eat?
Peter Piper.
If a pangolin could eat insects, how many insects would a pangolin eat?
Oh my goodness. Trillions. Well, insects aren't very big. You got different insects, and there's lots of them, of all of them.
70 million. Let's get into the episode.
Let's do it.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the GHT Overland Podcast. This is where you get the greatest interviews and insights from overland travelers around the globe, learning from their stories and experiences as we interview overlanders from places like Australia, Africa, the Americas, Portugal, and today you will learn the basics to the advanced in overlanding, so buckle up and get ready for a new adventure. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lisa. Today's featured guest is Carla, the founder of Blue Sky Society Trust. Carla is madly in love with Mamma Afrika and everything she has to offer. With a mantra to always live, laugh, and love, she founded Blue Sky Society in 2011. Then in 2016, Carla launched an all-women's expedition series focused on human-wildlife coexistence awareness, women empowerment in rural communities, youth conservation education, and raising money for specific charities.
So, without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Carla.
Hi, Chris and Lisa, and to all your listeners. Dialing in from sunny South Africa, so it's wonderful to be on your show.
Thank you for joining us today. We're humbled you've taken the time. So take a minute, if you would, and tell us in your own words what the mission of Blue Sky Society is and how that ties together with your all-women's expedition series.
Sure. Okay. So I started Blue Sky in 2012. It's a non-profit organization that raises money for various humanitarian, conservation, and environmental projects. So basically what I do is I go and find projects where I want to try and make a difference, and I raise money for them, and then hopefully inspire individuals and corporates out there to do the same. So in 2012, I started Blue Sky. I went from a job and a salary to just feeling that I needed to give back and do more. And I'd had this idea planted in my head that I wanted to start this organization. And I came up with the name because my dad and I always used to sit on the veranda and we used to talk about, there's always so much doom and gloom in life these days. And we decided that we were going to start a club, and we we're going to call it the Blue Sky Society. And it was always going to be about doing good and being positive and sharing good, feel-good stories. So when I got to choose the name for my organization, it was a no-brainer. So I called it the Blue Sky Society. Yeah, and it's about inspiring people, motivating them to go out and make a difference. I try and do whatever I possibly can as an individual. I've got some wonderful people that I work with. I partner with a lot of organizations that are doing good. And at about the same time that I started Blue Sky in 2012, I also heard about the poaching crisis that is happening in Africa at the moment. And we'll go through some of the stats later. But I just decided that I couldn't be one of these people that just complains about things and sits on the fence and does nothing. So I've always had an incredible passion for traveling in Africa and for our wildlife. And decided that I was going to put two of my passions together and started talking about this expedition that I wanted to do, raising money and awareness for elephants. And obviously life happens, and it's a lot of planning that goes on behind the scenes. And I only got to do it in 2016, but I started talking about it in about 2012, 2013. And a very dear friend of mine, he's one of the most traveled men in Africa, his name's Kingsley Holgate. And he said to me way back then, he said to me, Carla, you've got to do this as an all-female team because Mamma Afrika is ready for women. And it kind of just triggered or ignited something in my heart that I wanted to go and do these expeditions, bringing in women from all over the world and raising money for these projects that we go and see along the way.
That's awesome. So what inspired you to do this more than that conversation with your dad, the conservation piece of it with the elephants? Was there anything else that really drove you to start doing this?
Yeah, Chris, people inspire me. And there have been some of the greats, like I mentioned, Kingsley Holgate. There was another incredible gentleman called Lawrence Anthony. Also, these are mostly South African. You get your Dr. Jane Goodalls and your David Attenboroughs, and there are so many amazing people, men and women out there that are doing things on their own. And it kind of inspired me that one person can make a difference, and I just wanted to see what I could possibly do, what I could use within my means and the people that I know, and go out there and try and make a difference. So basically just knowing that one person can make a difference inspired me to go out there and try and do more, and to try and inspire younger people and general people, just to as I say, not complain and moan and talk about things, but to start doing small little things. I mean, people always ask me, because it gets very overwhelming when you start looking at what's happening around you. But there's so many small things that we as individuals can do, like, starting from recycling or sharing like podcasts or stories on social media. It doesn't necessarily have to, if you're in a good financial place, then it's a donation towards a cause that is close to you. But if you can't donate money, then there's so much else you can do. You can donate your time, your skills, as I say, share things on social media. So it was basically just, wanting to try and get more and more people to go out there and make a difference and work together.
Okay, that's great. We love your message and what you're doing.
Thanks.
Now, we were graciously introduced by a past guest of ours, Emily, of Two Dusty Travelers, and we were fascinated by the expeditions you're doing. Now, if I've got it right, you did one in 2016, traveling over 15,000 kilometers in 100 days. Then again, last year, 2018, overlanding 11,000 kilometers in 50 days. Anything planned for this year?
Yes, I'm heading out in 8 weeks' time. We are heading into Mozambique, which is on the eastern coastline of Africa. And we're going to be traveling about 5,000 kilometers up the coastline because we're going to go and collar elephants at a place called Gillet National Reserve. So I'm very excited about that. I've never been to that place. Apparently the vegetation is magnificent. They say there's a lot of Miambo forests, and it's very hilly. Apparently it looks a lot like Europe. So it's going to be quite amazing to see what Africa's got in store for us.
How safe is it for ladies to travel into Africa? And are there any specific places to stay away from?
Lisa, you know what? I always say to people, Africa is like any country in the world. It's good. It's got its good. It's got its bad, all at the same time. It's never boring. But one of the reasons why I started doing these all-female expeditions, because I wanted to show people that Africa is safe. People have got quite a preconceived idea that, Africa is wild and dangerous, and I'm not saying, you've got to be very mindful with your journeys and your travel. You've got to do your homework and kind of have some sort of plan. But generally, people are very kind and generous and respectful and interested out in Africa with the work that you're doing. And the kind of places that I don't like I try and avoid are, depending on, what's happening in a country, obviously with news, what's happening, you can see if there's unrest or what's going. But I always try and avoid like crowdy places, obviously dark places as well. I never ever drive in the evening unless it's like an emergency and I can't avoid it. Driving in the dark, I highly don't recommend that because obviously there are lots of potholes in the roads which you don't get to see. A lot of the animals in wintertime will be looking for warmth, so they kind of congregate on the roads, which makes it quite dangerous because it's so dark out there. If you're going to hit a pothole or an animal, it's going to really, obviously affect your safety. And then also places like I always say to people as well, it's just basically using your common sense. Always be respectful for people, be mindful for their religions and their communities and their beliefs. Don't go in as arrogant tourists. Just as I say, just be a little bit more mindful and aware of where you're going. But besides that, I mean, I'm all for traveling in Africa. And, obviously, as I say, you've got to do your homework and partner with somebody that knows where they're going or something. But it's safe. I mean, I think it's safe. Touch wood, I've never had any incidences. So, yeah.
So it's about doing your homework and just being smart, right?
Yeah, common sense, being smart, just being aware. I mean, a lot of people, your gut feeling, you know what it's like when you're traveling. You can feel if you go into a situation, no matter where you are in the world, you obviously, you get a feeling that something's not right. And if you get that feeling, the chances of there being something not right, just go with your gut. And also just don't do silly things, like don't walk down the main road in Lusaka or, in Zambia, where you've got hundreds of people that are poverty stricken with like your $100 camera and your gold dripping in gold jewelry. It's just like, you've got to be a bit street savvy, a bit wise. But it's as I say, I love Africa. I think the people are so kind and just so accommodating and friendly. And as I say, just genuinely interested and respectful of tourists.
Oh, that's great. Carla, what kind of logistics go into your expeditions you put together?
A lot. I actually got into a bit of a panic this afternoon because I was working on my logistics for Mozambique, and you can kind of it's like one of the most important factors with expeditions, as you know. But you can kind of break it down into two main components. So on the one hand, you've got the real items, I like to call them, which is your logistics of your camping equipment, making sure that your vehicles are ready. You've got all your legal documentation. You know what you need in terms of in your vehicle for specific countries. Like, for example, Mozambique, you need to have 2 of those little red triangles. You know the red triangles if you break down?
Okay.
I don't know if you guys, and like reflector vests. So there's certain things that you need in your vehicle, a fire extinguisher. So it's very good in terms of that to do your research. And then the other element is obviously the logistical element of dealing with people. So you've got your pre-expedition, and then you've obviously got while you're on expedition, just, making sure everyone's safe and everyone's happy and everyone's aware of what's going on and everyone's getting enough sleep and drinking enough water because it's very hot out there. So just those kind of logistics. But, obviously the basics like route planning, making sure that you know what the road conditions are like, because Africa changes daily. You can always have a plan, but then you've always got to have a plan B and a plan C. But things like safety, just making sure that you've got all your emergency numbers, just in case something happens. Medical stuff, making sure that all your everyone's had their right vaccinations and things like that, or that they've got any certificates, or if they need any specific injections or vaccinations. It's preparing the equipment, as I said, like the camping equipment, because a lot of the time you're out there in the middle of nowhere, and if you've forgotten something, you can make a plan, but it's always nice to be prepared. I kind of am on the other side of preparing, where I'll double check, and then I'll triple check, and then I'll quadruple check. But once you turn the key in the ignition and you leave, it's actually my best time, because all that anxiety and excitement of pre-expedition, the minute once you've gone, you make do with if you've left something behind. But and then you've got like all the food stuff and the catering stuff, and just if you've got people going with you, you've just got to make sure that you catering to the dietary requirements. Fuel, making sure that you're not going to run out of petrol or diesel along the way, because a lot of the countries there's not garages or gas stations around every corner. So those kind of logistics. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, but I love it. I really do.
Yeah. You're a busy woman getting all that together and running.
I know. I like to multitask.
Yeah, I guess you kind of have to.
Yeah.
For Africa, I'm curious, what like vaccinations does somebody need to have before they leave and go to Africa?
So it's very country specific. I always try, and we've got a very good travel clinic in Durban where I work and live, and I'll always just send them a message saying, listen, we're going to Zambia, because as I say, it does change all the time, because sometimes diseases break out, or there might be something that you need. So the travel clinics are very up to date with what's going on in Africa, and they normally advise me, you need hepatitis A or B shots, and it's very country specific. So there's no general rule. Like if you're going into Zambia, they recommend that you have a yellow fever certificate. Hepatitis A, hepatitis B, but it's most of it's predominantly just a recommendation. But the further north you go into Africa, they get quite strict on specific vaccinations and injections.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the vehicles you generally use. I remember seeing a post by Emily, and I believe you guys were in a Land Rover Defender?
That's my baby. It's the love of my life. Yes, her name is Dora. She was named by my niece, and she has pink wheel rims. And she's a little short wheelbase, a 1997 TDI Land Rover. For my first expedition, I was sponsored 3 vehicles. They were Fords, but they were fully kitted out with all rooftop tents and fridges and sliding drawers and everything that opens and closes. So they were really amazing. But so now I'm working up to get my own little fleet. So I've got my little 99, as I say, Dora. She's always my lead vehicle, so I'm always in the front. setting the pace. We can't go very fast because she can only go about 90 kilometers. I don't think it's about 50. I don't know how many miles that is per hour. So
she doesn't go that fast.
Yeah, it's not fast at all. Okay. And then I'm going to have 2 other Disco 2, so Land Rovers as well. So they're more comfy. But yeah, so those are my expedition vehicles. They genuinely 4x4s. But yeah, access to Africa, I mean, there's roads all over the place now. It's not as scary as it used to be. Well, not scary or challenging in terms of driving. But there are lots of potholes because obviously the roads deteriorate, and there are certain sections where if you go to more out of the way places, which I always love to go on the road less traveled. But yeah, so you've got to make sure that you've got good tires. I've got Cooper tires on my vehicle, which are they're amazing tires. Touch wood, once again, since I've had them. I haven't had any punctures because they're very heavy. So that's always a challenge in the back of my mind is changing tires. But yeah. So I actually drive around town in my little Land Rover expedition vehicle.
In
and
Dora?
People always say, yes, they always
Very
say to me, why do you drive around in her? And I was like, because when I'm stuck in the city, every time I go somewhere, even if it's down to the shop or something, I always feel like I'm going on expedition.
There you go.
It's an adventure. What are your recommendations for setting up a vehicle for meal prep and cooking?
So I always say to people, if you're going to be doing a lot of traveling, or if it's your business like mine, it's always good to try and spend a bit of money. And we've got a very good company in South Africa. I think they're actually American as well, called Frontrunner. And they've got like drawers and little cabinets and tables that fold down and fit in specific places. And I always say it's if you're going to be doing this a lot, me personally, I like to know where everything is, because there's nothing worse, looking for a can opener in the middle of a vehicle and boxes when there's so much things. So I'm a little bit OCD that way. I like things to be stored neatly. Frontrunner have got amazing drawer systems where you can store specific things. And I always try and put things back where I've found them. So, just to try and avoid, trying to find them later. But with regards to meal prep and cooking, we do a lot of cooking on the fire. I do have a gas bottle and that I take with me for those mornings where you need to leave quite quickly. I always need coffee before I go anywhere. Otherwise, I get a bit grumpy.
Yes, don't we all?
Yeah, and so most of our cooking and prepping is the prepping will be done on a table. I've got a little table that slides from underneath my roof rack. And then obviously you're always trying to wash fruit and vegetables, especially if you've bought them from the market. And then the people that are traveling with me always get involved in the cooking and cleaning. So it's a bit of a team effort. So as I say, a lot of our cooking is done on the fire. So it's a lot of stews, and we've got a thing in South Africa. It's called a potjie, which is a little black iron pot. It means a small little pot in Afrikaans. It's called a potjie. But you can do like stews or curries or whatever's left at the end of the expedition, where you go into the drawer and you see whatever's left there, throw it in the pot and try and make something edible. So,
That's cool. So any tips you've got for purchasing fresh meats, vegetables from small towns and villages that you go through in Africa? Yeah,
so fresh vegetables, it's always nice to support the local guys. On the side of the road, you won't go far without finding a street vendor that's selling tomatoes and onions and potatoes, your basic. Also, just be aware of where you're stopping. If you're in a city, I wouldn't really recommend stopping in the middle of the city. Like if you're a little bit out of town, it's a bit easier to stop. just in terms of people coming to your car and hassling you and things like that.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, in the city, you've obviously got a lot of your supermarket franchises that are there. But it is nice to support the local guys and buy from them. Meat, me personally, I would never recommend buying meat on the side of the road because you never know how long it's been lying in the sun for.
Sounds like good advice.
No, definitely. Like sometimes you'll drive past and there'll be like a cow hanging in a tree. So you don't want to be buying from that. I'm not brave enough to do that. But there are a lot of the big cities, you can get your general stuff. So before I leave on expedition, I'll stock up with a lot of canned stuff because that lasts. And then you can buy your fresh veg and fruit along the way at these smaller little, guys on the side of the road. And then meat, I would always buy it either in a supermarket or something. So when you go through the big cities, it's basically best to stock up and have a good fridge in your car. That's always a very important thing, especially when traveling in Africa, is to spend a little bit of money and get a good fridge that works. A lot of them have got fridge freezer sides, so you can obviously freeze some of the meat for 2 to 3 nights meals. But
what refrigerator do you tend to use, Carla?
I use a National Luna. That's what I've got. It's just a make. It's quite a good one. It's got a fridge freezer side.
And what size is it?
I've got a small one. It's a 45 liter, but there is a 60 liter one, which I'm wanting to get a bigger one.
With an expedition of a bunch of people, that's pretty smart.
But it's also nice taking like a cooler box, and if you're buying vegetable, because sometimes the fridge, if it's not set at the right temperature, because it gets so hot, sometimes the fridge battles. So I always say to people, if you're going to get like salad stuff like lettuce and tomatoes, rather get like some of those ice bricks, those blue, I don't know if you guys have got them, and you can put them in your freezer and then they freeze, and then you can put them in like a cooler box for the day, and then you can put just your vegetables and your salad stuff in that, because then it doesn't burn the lettuce or the tomatoes, because sometimes they get like freezer, when they get frozen, they get like a funny burn, and then you've got to throw them away. Yeah.
Oh, good advice. I like that.
Yeah.
What's a favorite meal or recipe you enjoy while overlanding?
The potjie, like I said, the little black cast iron pot. There's nothing like a potjie. It takes about 3-4 hours it's like a stew to describe it. And it's so lovely because you get to sit around the campfire, have 1 or 2 little gin and tonics while you're talking and listening to the noises around you in the bush and the wildlife. And I enjoy potjies. They're probably one of my favorites.
And how do you generally do laundry during your expeditions?
We've got a bar. It's like a bar of it's called Sunlight Soap. It's like a green bar of soap, and that normally works well. But I also like when we drive into like a campsite of sorts, I will always ask if there's anyone there that wants to earn a bit of extra money, because there's often ladies there that absolutely love, earning a bit of extra money. So they normally help out with washing. I always take a washing line that you can like string up between 2 trees or a couple of bushes. But in some of the countries, you've got to be careful, like Malawi, because there's like a fly that lays eggs in your clothes. So you've just got to be careful. Yeah. So I would recommend just, as I say, doing washing or just chatting to one of the camp hands or the people that work there and just saying, because 99% of the time there's somebody that's looking for a bit of extra cash, as we all know, and it's always nice to support the local guys, just to give them a bit of extra money. So that's how I normally do my laundry.
And then on the hygiene aspect, do you have a shower and toilet set up, or what are your methods for keeping it simple and hygienic during an expedition?
So a lot of the campsites that we stay at have got the basic ablutions. Sometimes they're in good conditions, sometimes they're in not so good conditions. I always travel with hand sanitizer. I've got a tiny little bottle of hand sanitizer that I keep in my cubby hole. And if we've been to a school or a shopping center, because there's so many germs around everywhere, as we know. So I'll always just either use wet wipes, wet wipes, I don't know, I think you call them wet wipes. They're like that little cloth thing with, I'll either wipe my hands with that, or I'll get some hand sanitizer and just put it on to try and keep things, a bit hygienic. I don't have a toilet system. But, you learn very quickly when you're on long roads to go and find a tree or a bush and go, bit of a team effort. But we do try and find places. But in Africa, a lot of the gas stations, the facilities aren't great. So sometimes it's actually easier just finding a bush or a tree on the side of the road and going there. But I always say to people, if you do need to go and pee behind a tree, then always just remember to bring your toilet paper back with you, because there's nothing worse than, seeing people going into a site and there's just toilet paper all over the place. It can make me mad. But we do what we can. Africa's, is a bit backward compared to Europe and the States.
What music are you listening to during a trip?
Ooh, good question.
Lisa, I am an 80s child through and through. So anyone that gets to travel with me always gets to listen to 80s music. I love 80s
you would
music.
like that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It
makes me so happy. I know.
Put me next to you and Dora and we'll be back down the road.
Oh, Lisa, I promise you, I try and listen to, obviously you've got so many different personalities and interests. So I always, you try and kind of encourage people to bring their own little music, their playlist. But normally when I'm in Dora, we've got 80s music blaring. We have so much fun on the radio. We get to, like when you're on those long, boring roads where you're traveling and it's just straight and there's nothing, we'll often play, and a fun song comes up in one car, we'll get on the radios and we'll play it to the car behind us, and we play all these silly road games and just to keep you entertained. And we normally choose a song per expedition. So there's always like a theme song. So the one it's one of my best ones is Journey, Don't Stop Believing. That can always get us just on the road and happy and just, but playlist is probably right up there with route planning. It's very important to have a good playlist and a good selection of music.
So how fun was that? From basic requirements for overlanding in South Africa to setting up your cooking kitchen setup, we learned what a pokey is. We learned a lot from Carla.
Absolutely.
What else?
Oh, man. I would have to say what comes to mind from a woman's perspective, if there was an opportunity to not just go to South Africa to travel, because that would be cool in itself, but to actually be involved and take part in one of Carla's expeditions would be completely over the top unreal.
A must do. Fair to say.
A must do.
I would think that the experience and the knowledge would be life changing. Is that fair to say? Is that too over the top?
No,
I think it would be. There's so much to learn. We learned so much from Carla just talking to her. Can't imagine what it would be like going on an expedition, listening to 80 music.
Well, I was going to say,
cruising down the road in Dora.
Yeah.
Rocking.
You can send me tomorrow.
I'll
okay,
call.
You're thinking about that a little too long. Our interview with Carla is our longer format interview, so we split these into 2 episodes for your downloading pleasure. Don't worry, new episodes are released each Thursday.
In next week's episode, we learn more about Carla's all-women expeditions, along with a ton of eye-opening amount of knowledge on conservation in South Africa. From elephants to rhinos to honeybees, helping control elephants from destroying crops. That was super interesting to learn. To those cute little guys, the pangolins. And of course, more road stories from Africa, learning valuable tips and ideas.
Remember, it's a good idea to visit the show notes page on our website at ghteoverland.com/podcast. Select the Blue Sky Society Trust episode. All the details and helpful links are already there for you.
That is correct, and be sure to send your questions, suggestions, and feedback to ghteoverlandpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love it if you'd connect with us on the social medias at ghteoverland. Be sure and share this episode with your friends who enjoy travel off the beaten path, or if they're just curious about travel off the beaten path.
It would mean the world to us if you'd rate and review the podcast. Give GHT Overland a little love on your podcast app of choice so we can reach as many Overlanders as possible. Thank you, and we will see you next Thursday for part 2 of the GHT Overland podcast with Carla of Blue Sky Society Trust. Bye.